The dining room looked perfect that night, almost painfully perfect. The crystal chandelier cast a warm glow across the polished oak table, reflecting off expensive plates and untouched glasses of wine. My mother had cooked one of those large family dinners she usually made during holidays, though nobody had told me what exactly we were celebrating. The smell of roasted chicken and garlic filled the room, but beneath it sat something heavier, something tense enough to make every breath feel uncomfortable. My older brother, Daniel, sat across from me, scrolling through his phone with nervous fingers. He barely looked up when I arrived. My mother forced a smile the moment I sat down. "You made it," she said softly. Dad remained silent at the head of the table, his expression unreadable. He waited until everyone filled their plates before finally putting down his fork. "We need to discuss something important," he said. The tone in his voice immediately tightened the air in the room. I glanced around the table. Nobody spoke. My brother suddenly looked very interested in the food on his plate. Dad reached beside his chair and pulled out a thick brown folder. He slid it slowly across the table until it stopped directly in front of me. I frowned. "What is this?" "Open it." I flipped through the papers. Bank statements, loan documents, legal notices. Then I saw the number. $330,000. My stomach tightened. "What the hell is this?" I asked quietly. My father folded his hands together. "Your brother is in debt." I looked at Daniel, expecting him to explain, maybe even laugh and tell me it was some kind of misunderstanding. Instead, he kept staring downward. "How does someone even end up owing this much?" "It doesn't matter," Dad replied sharply. "What matters is fixing it." I slowly closed the folder. "Okay, so what are you asking me for?" My father leaned back in his chair as if the answer should have already been obvious. "You have savings, investments, you're doing well financially, you can cover this." For a moment, I honestly thought he was joking. "You want me to pay off Daniel's debt?" "Not want," he corrected coldly. "Need." I let out a quiet laugh of disbelief. "Dad, this isn't a few $1,000s. This is $330,000. My mother finally spoke, her voice weak and careful. "Families help each other." I looked at her, then back at my brother. "How did this even happen?" Daniel finally muttered something under his breath. "Business problems." But something about the way he avoided eye contact made me instantly suspicious. Dad cut in before I could ask more questions. "The reason doesn't matter anymore. It matters to me," I said firmly. His face hardened. "You're focusing on the wrong thing." "No," I replied calmly. "I'm focusing on responsibility." The silence that followed felt dangerous. My father's jaw tightened. "Your brother is blood, and I'm blood too," I answered. Nobody said anything. I looked around the table, waiting for someone, anyone, to speak reasonably. But my mother stayed quiet, and Daniel still wouldn't even look at me. That's when I realized this dinner had never been a discussion. They had already decided I was supposed to sacrifice myself. Dad leaned forward slowly, his eyes cold and steady. "If you refuse," he said, "then don't consider yourself part of this family anymore." The words hung in the air like a gunshot. My mother lowered her eyes immediately. Daniel remained silent. Not one person defended me. I felt something inside me shift at that moment, not anger, not even sadness. Just clarity. I looked at my father for several long seconds, waiting for some sign that he would take the words back. He didn't, so I quietly pushed my chair away from the table, stood up, grabbed my car keys from the counter, and walked toward the front door while the silence behind me grew heavier with every step. 3 days passed after I walked out of my parents' house, yet the tension from that dinner still clung to me like smoke. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard my father's voice repeating the same sentence over and over again. "Then don't consider yourself part of this family anymore." What hurt most wasn't the ultimatum itself. It was how quickly everyone accepted it. My mother stayed silent. My brother never once tried to stop me. Years of loyalty suddenly meant nothing the moment I refused to become their financial escape plan. I tried distracting myself with work, but my mind kept circling back to one question. How does someone end up owing $330,000? Daniel had always been irresponsible, but not reckless enough for something this massive. At least, that's what I used to believe. Late Friday night, my phone buzzed while I sat alone in my apartment staring blankly at the television. It was my cousin Marcus. "You awake?" the message read. I replied almost immediately. "Yeah." A few seconds later, my phone rang. Marcus didn't waste time with small talk. "You still think Daniel just got unlucky?" I frowned. "What are you talking about?" There was a pause on the other end. I didn't want to get involved, he said carefully. But after what your dad did to you, you deserve the truth. My chest tightened. What truth? Another pause. Then my phone buzzed repeatedly with incoming messages. Screenshots. At first, I didn't understand what I was looking at. Then my stomach dropped. Photos of Daniel standing beside a black Lamborghini. Videos inside luxury casinos. Receipts for expensive watches worth more than most people's yearly salaries. Pictures from beach resorts in Dubai and Miami. Private VIP parties. I kept scrolling in disbelief. What is this? Marcus sighed heavily. Your brother's been gambling for over 2 years. I sat frozen on the couch. No, I muttered instinctively. That can't be real. It is, Marcus replied. The business story is a lie. I stared at another screenshot showing tens of thousands of dollars transferred to online betting accounts. The room suddenly felt smaller. Every memory of my father defending Daniel replayed differently now. Every excuse, every emotional speech about helping family. None of it had been honest. He lost all that money gambling? I asked quietly, and trying to look rich, Marcus answered. Cars, vacations, clubs, he wanted people to think he was successful. I rubbed my forehead slowly, trying to process everything. But Dad acted like this happened recently. Marcus laughed bitterly. That's another lie. My grip tightened around the phone. What do you mean? He already bailed Daniel out once last year. I went completely still. What? Your father paid off part of his debt months ago. Almost 80 grand. He thought nobody knew. For several seconds, I couldn't speak. The pressure at that dinner suddenly made perfect sense. Dad wasn't shocked by the debt. He was exhausted from cleaning up Daniel's mess and wanted someone else to carry the burden this time. Me. I leaned back against the couch, staring blankly at the ceiling while anger slowly mixed with disappointment. All those years growing up, I believed responsibility mattered in our family. I worked hard, saved carefully, avoided trouble, built my life step by step. And somehow I was the one punished for it. Because responsible people are easier to exploit. Marcus lowered his voice. There's something else you should know. I swallowed hard. What? Your father told people you already agreed to help. He's been promising creditors money they don't even have yet. I closed my eyes slowly. Even after threatening to cut me off, he still fully expected me to sacrifice everything for Daniel. Not because it was fair. Not because it was right. But because they believed I would eventually give in under the weight of guilt and pressure. 2 months after leaving my family behind, my life finally started to feel quiet again. The silence in my apartment no longer felt lonely. It felt peaceful. No sudden phone calls demanding favors. No manipulative guilt trips disguised as family concern. No constant pressure to rescue people from problems they created themselves. I had moved into a smaller apartment across the city, far from the neighborhood where I grew up. It wasn't luxurious, but it was mine. Every piece of furniture inside had been chosen by me. Every bill paid by me. Every calm evening earned by me. For the first time in years, I felt emotionally free. Work had also improved. Without family drama draining my energy, I focused harder than ever. My boss noticed it almost immediately and offered me a promotion I'd been chasing for over a year. The raise wasn't life-changing, but it gave me something more valuable than money. Confidence. That Friday evening, rain hammered softly against the windows while I sat on the couch reviewing documents from work. A half-finished cup of coffee rested on the table beside me, and an old jazz playlist filled the apartment with low music. Then someone knocked on the door. At first, I ignored it. Nobody visited me unexpectedly. The knock came again, louder this time. I stood slowly and walked toward the door, slightly irritated. But the moment I looked through the peephole, my entire body froze. It was my father. For several seconds, I simply stared. He looked different, older somehow. The sharp confidence he always carried was gone. His posture seemed heavier, his face tired beneath the dim hallway light. Even his expensive coat looked wrinkled and neglected. I opened the door halfway but didn't invite him inside. What are you doing here? I asked calmly. He avoided eye contact for a moment before answering. I need to talk to you. His voice sounded unfamiliar without its usual authority. Rainwater dripped from his coat onto the hallway floor while silence stretched between us. I think we've already said everything we needed to say, I replied. He swallowed hard. Please. That single word surprised me more than seeing him at my door. My father never said please. I stepped aside without speaking, allowing him to enter. He walked slowly into the apartment, glancing around quietly. It's nice, he muttered. I closed the door behind him. Why are you here? He remained standing instead of sitting down. For a long moment, he seemed unable to find the right words. Then he finally spoke. Your brother disappeared. I stared at him blankly. What? He left 3 weeks ago, Dad said quietly. Nobody knows where he is. I crossed my arms. And, his expression tightened painfully. The creditors keep coming to the house. They're threatening lawsuits now. Some of them aren't exactly patient people. I said nothing. Dad looked down at the floor before continuing. Your mother's terrified. The guilt in his voice would have affected me once. Maybe even a few months earlier, I would have immediately rushed back to help. But now I could finally see the situation clearly. None of this was my responsibility. You told me I wasn't family anymore, I reminded him calmly. The words hit him harder than I expected. His shoulders dropped slightly, and for the first time in my life, he looked unsure of himself. I was angry, he muttered. No, I corrected quietly. You were willing to sacrifice me for him. He opened his mouth to argue, but no words came out. Because he knew it was true. The room fell silent except for the rain tapping against the windows. I studied him carefully while he stood there avoiding my eyes. This was the same man who once controlled every room he entered. The same man who believed authority alone could force people into obedience. But now desperation had replaced pride. And somewhere deep down, I realized this might be the first time in his life that consequences had finally reached him too. A week after my father showed up at my apartment, he called me again. I almost ignored it when I saw his name appear on my phone screen, but something stopped me. Maybe curiosity, maybe the part of me that still hoped there was a chance to salvage whatever remained of our family. His voice sounded unusually calm. Your mother wants us to have dinner together, he said carefully. Just the two of us. No arguments this time. I stayed silent for a moment before answering. What's the point? The point, he replied quietly, is fixing things before it's too late. Those words lingered in my mind long after the call ended. Part of me didn't trust him anymore, but another part remembered the man who used to teach me how to ride a bike, the father who once stayed awake helping me study for exams, the version of him that existed before money and favoritism poisoned everything. Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet. The restaurant he chose overlooked the city skyline, one of those expensive places filled with low lighting, polished marble floors, and waiters who moved silently between tables. The kind of place my father always loved because it made him feel important. When I arrived, I immediately noticed something wrong. My father wasn't alone. Daniel sat across from him wearing a dark blazer, casually sipping water like nothing had happened. Like he hadn't disappeared for weeks while the family drowned in problems he created. The moment our eyes met, he gave me a small nod, almost arrogant in its confidence. No apology, no shame, no regret. I stopped beside the table, staring at both of them. You said this was just us, I said coldly. Dad stood quickly. Sit down first, please. Reluctantly, I pulled out the chair and sat, though every instinct told me to walk away immediately. A waiter approached, but I declined the menu. I'm not staying long. Dad forced a tense smile. We're family. We can still work this out. I looked at Daniel. Where exactly were you? He shrugged slightly. I needed space. I almost laughed at the absurdity of it. Space. I repeated. You disappear while everyone else deals with your mess. His expression hardened instantly. You think this has been easy for me? I leaned back in my chair, stunned by the audacity. Dad quickly interrupted before the argument escalated. That's not why we're here. Then he reached into his leather briefcase and pulled out several papers. The moment I saw them, my stomach sank. Loan agreements. Debt restructuring documents. My father slowly pushed them across the table toward me. Just help us one last time, he said quietly. I stared at him in disbelief. You brought me here for this. It's different now, he insisted. We only need partial support. Once we stabilize everything, we'll pay you back. I looked at Daniel again, waiting for him to finally speak like an adult. Instead, he crossed his arms. You're acting selfish, he muttered. That sentence erased whatever hope remained inside me. Selfish. After years of being responsible. After building my life carefully while he destroyed his own chasing attention and luxury. I suddenly realized nothing had changed. Not my father, not my brother, not this family dynamic where my value only existed when I could rescue someone else. The restaurant noise faded into the background while clarity settled over me completely. I slowly closed the folder and placed it back onto the table. Then I stood up. Dad looked panicked immediately. Wait. I picked up my untouched glass of water and set it down gently beside the papers. You know what hurts the most? I asked quietly. Neither of them answered. You still don't understand why I left. Dad's expression tightened. This was never about money, I continued calmly. You lost me the moment you decided my worth depended on what I could sacrifice for someone who never took responsibility for his own life. Daniel rolled his eyes slightly, but this time I felt nothing seeing it. No anger, no disappointment, just distance. I looked at my father one final time and saw exhaustion written across his face, but also something else. Regret, real regret, but by then, it was far too late for apologies to rebuild what had already been destroyed. Sometimes the hardest decision is walking away from the people you love most. But protecting your peace is not selfish, it's survival. If this story touched you, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more powerful emotional stories and life-changing family dramas.